This week on RSBANDB Update, in a turn of events flipping endgame and beginner content on its head, we discuss the old school 2026 roadmap. Deadman and Leagues reign supreme, but cows, sailing, and the impending arrival of Vampyrium and the Guthixian Archives fill out the year. This is RSBANDB Update, episode 1074, recorded Friday, January 30th, 2026. The Great Inversion. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RSBANDB Update. This week, we're doing a little bit of a different thing than we normally do. Many folks will know, of course, that last week we talked heavily about the road to restoration and the 2026 RS ahead, but there is also something else happening on Sunday, and that was the old school 2026 roadmap. And I figured, Sirion figured, and a few other people figured that, you know, given the state of both games and the fact that we have, you know, probably, I think, one of the biggest years for anything RuneScape in a long time, let's just dive in and talk about the old school roadmap, because I was sitting here on Sunday and I thought maybe I don't have that much to say about it, but I started bouncing some things off you, and then everything just started flowing from there.
Wait, we're here to talk about the old school roadmap? I can't just shit talk about RuneScape 3?
I mean, you could if you wanted to, and then I could do the same.
No. We're not here to talk about RuneScape 3. And for legal reasons, that was a joke. I would never shit talk about RuneScape 3. Except for all the times I did on the show. Probably. We probably have recordings of me shit talking about RuneScape 3.
Yeah, you do in the old school show, and you know I think
not in the old school show.
I think I was liable to have turned the old school show's last episode into the biggest complaint session about old school that probably existed.
Yeah,
which I mean that was allowed back then. But the point is, there's lots of good stuff in this roadmap. It's just a question of, I think, how it was presented. And we want to kind of go through some of those presentation decisions.
Well, you're jumping to conclusions very quickly. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. See you next week.
Well, that's one option. But we'll get into all that in good time, of course. I feel like I need to introduce you because, you know, you're not around on these episodes as much as you used to be. Last time you were on was when we talked about sailing. And before that was of course the OSRS show, but you're one of the people that moved to old school when the Hero Pass thing happened, but not because of Hero Pass, but because of the reactions and response to it.
Yeah, that's right.
And over time, I started actually to see that reasoning. So it was definitely an interesting time, and I think we've moved past that. Both us and the game, thankfully. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can have many words about the reasons, but you know, for me the most important thing is that the way my relationship, I guess, with RuneScape had become one that it just existed. It was just there. Right, like it was very much it's always been there, and change. You know, you stick with the familiar, but there wasn't a spark anymore. There wasn't a drive anymore. And I think the moment I started playing old school, I sort of fell in love with the game again, and I started feeling again like how I felt originally playing the game and falling in love with it. So.
Yeah, that's great.
We're a little bit past the honeymoon phase right now. Right, I will admit that. But
and you know, you're lucky you were able to do that because my spark for old school ended when the nostalgia ended.
Yeah, that's fair. Not for me. I think, you know, I've listeners that have been with the show for like a while and back when I was on the show will know that I am I'm a mechanics person. I'm a design person. I
Yeah, the cracks
love
started to emerge on your quarter when you had to talk about the dreaded achievement update in Shattered Worlds.
Yeah, exactly. And we sort of talked about why they weren't the right thing for the game at the time. And I really love sort of thinking about game integrity and game health. Ironically, like I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but I think we were talking about these topics way before they became mainstream. And
Yeah, and for me, because of GIM and the continual content flow, I was not able to get to that point until Leagues this year. But Leagues just showed me how much was broken with RS3.
Yeah, exactly. So, I will take some credit and say, told you so. Like I think I've raised this multiple times on the show. And I'm not to say that old school is perfect. But it is not. Like it really has its own problems. Some of them legacy, some of them bad choices that have been made since. But the foundation is much more solid and it is just more interesting. And I don't remember, somebody said it in like I think even the RSBANDB Discord just in the past week, where I think old school stays interesting for much more longer because like we are seeing a lot of focus in RuneScape on two parts of the game. The early game, because we have like 10 different new player experiences at this point, right? And Endgame, because that's where everybody is.
Yeah.
But the middle game is very much, completely abandoned. Manaforce, when that came out, was a mid-game update and it bombed, right? Like
and to be fair, if you know what to do when you start a new account and through that mid-level progression, the content that you will play is decent and rewarding.
It is, but it's also you skip through it very quickly, I feel, and that sort of has reduced the investment in that area. But I think it also means that you lose that interesting part of the game, which I think is the most interesting part of the game. And old school is able to stretch that mid game much longer.
And if I can say anything to the people who are listening to this, who are RS3 natives, and you're wondering, what are you going to take from this episode? Take these last 5 minutes as an introduction, and look at what the content that's going to be presented this year in old school does, and say, wouldn't it be interesting if something in this mold, not necessarily the exact content per se, but something in this mold were to come to RS3?
Yeah, I think, old school has its own problems, and we will actually talk about that probably at the very end, because I think one of the biggest things we need to talk about is the one thing that was not mentioned on the summit itself. It does get a mention on the news post. It was not mentioned on the summit itself. That is an area where I think RuneScape is doing much better and going to do much better in this year. But all in all, I think the way you can interpret this roadmap, if you have no interest in old school, still listen to the show and imagine if we are 2-3 years down the line with all of these integrity updates and have a more solid foundation,
exactly.
No unstable foundations, then I do believe that a roadmap for RuneScape in 3 years' time might look somewhat similar.
Right. And for folks wondering, I did consult the Patreon folks about this. And when I said comparative between the two, that's exactly what I mentioned in terms of where we begin now and where RS3 is going to be potentially in 2 to 3 years. But before all that can begin, I need to thank our experienced tier Patreon members, because without them, we wouldn't be doing this episode. So this week, that includes Amos Reed, Bladecom, Dominic R., Jade Gizmo, Jason S., Jesse W., Julia W., Kesky, Lemon Launch, Luminos, Ricky A., Psyoaces, Snail Mange, The Naked Captain, and Tim. Big, huge thank you, everybody. You'll hear more about our Patreon offerings a little bit later in the show. But in the meantime, full show notes can be found over at update.show. We have our Discord, which Sirion mentioned, update.show/Discord. Chat with us. We're all in there. It's a good place to be. And, of course, the Friends chatting game as well. BitsBytes. Been seeing a few new faces in there since the roadmap dropped last week. So welcome back, everybody who's joining in since then. But we're going to go seasonal on this. And if we look at the roadmap as they laid it out, the first thing that's coming at the end of this month, Deadman Annihilation. I feel like this needs a bit of an introduction for our RS3 people, maybe even some of the old school people. But this is the PvP temporary game mode that enables PvP everywhere. You have the opportunity to lose your bank items, to lose experience rates, and oh my god. You have to kind of be into PvP to do this. I actually thought about maybe setting some time around this year to dive into this, but I don't think I'm going to at this point for this, just as kind of a way to get the feet wet and see what it's like, because long-term listeners of the show will know in a lot of other games outside of RS, I was always big into the PvP community. So in terms of something that's heavily curated like this in a temporary game mode, this would be a good way, maybe I say, without, having done it before, potentially getting the feet wet. But typically we don't talk about much. We don't talk about PvP much, and we didn't talk about PvP much on the OS show either.
No, I think Deadman is an interesting phenomenon. Deadman is really the esports segment of RuneScape.
Pay attention to that, folks.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned this, and I think I can reveal this already, is that they are actually doing an in-person event for their finale of Deadman. I think it's Deadman Annihilation this year. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's the finale. It's in Chicago.
Yeah.
In I think end of June.
Yeah. So basically, the idea about Deadman Annihilation is it's a free for all, right? Like it is a little bit like Leagues with like accelerated rates, but you can lose everything by dying essentially, and it's PKing is available, or PvP is enabled basically everywhere. There are safe zones, but like anywhere you might want to go, it has it. What ends up happening, and I think looking at the community reaction to the roadmap, there was a lot of focus on temporary game modes. We'll go into the other temporary game mode in a moment, but like there was a lot of sort of disappointment that seems to be what at least the first part of the year is about.
Yeah,
I think we underestimate, right? Like you and I, we are players first and foremost. We are not consumers of content. I think there is a very large segment of audience for RuneScape that might not even necessarily play the game directly, or they play it more casually, but they are much more part of the sort of, they follow the content creators, right? Like they consume the game indirectly.
Like I have competitive content creators from other video games that appear in YouTube and on YouTube Shorts and whatnot, and eventually that spirals into getting OSRS PvP content on YouTube, even though it's not something I actively seek out. So if I'm not doing that, imagine somebody who knows a little bit about RS and is a little bit interested in PvP, and then is really interested in watching, people, get blasted by others. That's where we go on this esports PvP angle for OS.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what it is. I think for the average player, I mean, I'm not interested. Most people I know are not interested. It is a temporary game mode. You can actually get really, really cool rewards this time around that look really good. But yeah, meh. I will be ignoring it as I usually do.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, we just wanted to give a brief mention to the fact that it was here, and that's a bit of an opening into exactly what the rest of the winter looks like, because a lot of people will see, of course, that, you're doing another temporary game mode in spring with leagues, but before that, we go back to what makes OS with the introductory cow boss.
The Bowvine bully.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an idea of some of the rewards, you can read the news post to see the full thing, but one of the potential rewards, pending green light, is the bottomless milk bucket. And, I think these introductory bosses are good to have, and my sense on this is that this will be Scurrius, or just slightly less than Scurrius.
No. So what they were actually saying is Scurrius was meant to be sort of an entry-level boss, and they found that the way they tuned Scurrius, and actually it's interesting, we talked about this on the actual Scurrius release week on our old school podcast. You still need to be quite far along in your journey before you're going to start doing,
because we said
Scurrius.
80s,
like you need at least
really successful.
Yeah.
And
but
60s to begin. Stats-wise.
Really, like level 60s is recommended. You need at least like 4 rune and probably some dragon weaponry. The idea with the Bowvine bully is to go even earlier. Like you can basically, I don't know if you can go in here from like level 3 immediately, but the idea is to get like basic mechanics in very, very quickly. So I would assume, for example, this doesn't require prayer switching.
Right. And to give an idea of how important this is that I think if you train these skills early on, especially in OS, you're going to prevent a lot of the anguish that emerges later when people aren't familiar with the combat system. Because if you consider a boss versus a Slayer task, the Slayer tasks are all relatively lean backwards. But bossing is very much a lean forward experience that's very different.
Exactly. So from what I can tell, this will really be about movement mechanics, which are very, very important in old school bossing. So I think it's a good start. It doesn't require any prayer.
That's even a good start for me.
Yeah, no. There will also be a hard mode of this boss, which the content creators had an event at the Jagex HQ, and from what I can tell, nobody has defeated the hard mode of this boss yet. It is really,
and that's
and,
the thing.
Like basically
and
they were saying
we were saying when we got the Flesh Hatcher Macarnez in December is that introductory level boss, but at the same time, everybody who knows what they're doing hours in is done with the content and can move on.
Yeah, but basically the way they thought about it is, what if we made the easiest boss in the game also the hardest boss in the game? So there's like a crazy hard mode that's like a challenge mode. So that's going to be, and I think this is really clever of them because it's going to create this hype and this interest around the release date. Like there's going to be a race and content creators. So it's just a clever thing to do. It's a fun challenge. It's not going to get you anything. And I think it's a really clever
I'll probably even for myself check out the easy mode variant, because you know how my combat goes in that game.
Yeah. And look, I think the rewards are fun. I think the cowbell amulet is going to be this is a free to play boss actually. It's also a free to play quest that introduces this boss, and I think the amulet is going to be the only free to play reward, which allows you to teleport to the cow pen, which is the one east of Lumbridge. And the idea being, between the Chronicle, which teleports you to the Champions Guild, and this, like, it starts giving you a really solid sort of set of early teleports, because getting around is really hard early on.
Cow slippers, bull bones, rump steak, which heals 10, similar to tuna. I mean, like the thing would I be right in saying that people were feeling like maybe there wasn't enough content this year? But I think if you look at even something like this boss that's going to be coming relatively soon for this, I think this is a good piece basically
the update is already in the can. So if the poll gets greenlit, it will probably get released like the week or 2 weeks
sometime
after.
in February.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Right on. Well, I wasn't planning on checking it out, but maybe I'll check it out now.
Yeah.
All right. Should we move on to the other big thing that everybody jumps up and down and gets excited about in terms of other temporary game modes, leagues, demonic packs in April?
League 6.
Yeah. You are in the unfortunate position where your league's experiences always get interrupted.
It's fine. If they just do this like the last week of April, it's fine, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll be gone a good chunk of April, so that's unfortunate.
League 6 Demonic Pack starts sometime in April. Yama's League, they say, which is a boss that we really talked heavily about on the OS show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they have done a really good job at making it feel a little bit fresh again.
We're not starting in Mistlin.
We're not starting in Mistlin. So leagues in old school are region locked. Just to, if people
which
want
was
to
a very
why.
Controversial thing when we did all of our RS3 leagues coverage, talking about that.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, in old school they're region locked, which personally I love. But I think for several times now, people have asked like, "Hey, we always start in Mistlin. It's starting to get a little bit old." Like, there's literally, because also the tasks don't tend to change that much. There's literally like an optimal route at this point to like Mistlin to get you like the first 2 or 3 relics. So it was getting a little bit stale. So that's why we're going to start in a new region.
What are we thinking it'll be? They haven't said.
They haven't said. So you will start in Yama's lair. Canonically and lore accurately, this would be in Corinth, which is the new continent we have in old school. That being said, I think most people think it is likely going to be Kandarin. So Kandarin last time was a bit of a meme pick because it didn't really have anything good in terms of content.
Its pick rate was 2%.
It doesn't have any endgame content. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't really have much endgame content, Kandarin. So
it's a great skilling region, though.
It's a great skilling region, and it sort of does make sense as a starting region. Some of the big things, of course, are things like agility, because there's only limited places you can train that. There is a level 1 agility course, of course, in Kandarin, the Gnome Stronghold one, the classic. Other than that, like, I think most skilling
also opens up piety to everybody.
It opens up piety to everybody. Yep, that's an interesting one for sure. Of course, it also opens Barbarian Assault to everybody. But other than that, I do think it is a great region. I think I picked it the Leagues 4, the first one I played. That was my utility region, and I don't regret it. It had a lot of good stuff, especially because there's some kind of history here that makes you automatically get all of the chompy heads, so you don't have to kill a single chompy. So yeah, no, I think it was a really, really fun region. But yeah,
but they haven't said that for sure. They could go Korin, they could go Varlamore.
They could, yep. I think either of those would work as well as a starting region. Other ones might start getting a little bit funny. I
don't think
Asgarnia could work.
I don't think it would be any other ones. I think Asgarnia is too similar to Mistlin, and it's very PVM heavy for a starting region.
Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, the desert and Mauritania are a little bit, they lack certain qualities. So Kandarin is a solid bet. That being said, if they want to troll and give everybody immediately access to Fifth Dennis and go for Tyranwin as starting region. Anyway, it's interesting. It's largely going to be the same as last time with new relics.
The thing I wanted to hone in on is that the combat masteries are not going to be linear.
Yeah, exactly. So as opposed to the RuneScape leagues, and as opposed to like Leagues 4 and earlier, they decided to disentangle the combat stuff from the relics, because it always felt a little bit like there's one like combat relic you pick, and that's just you pick your style, and that was not very interesting. So basically, you had like a track for each of the three combat styles, and certain milestones. So like killing your first hill giant, I think was the last one. Really silly.
Yeah.
Killing your first monster that has 100 hit points or higher. Getting your fire cape. Killing an echo boss. All of that stuff gave you points to sort of progress against any of the three tracks. And now they're going to make it non-linear, which I think is interesting because it allows you to do even more interesting, because we always get like these snowflake builds. So I think last time there was this setup you could do, or the one before, with like Darox and make it even more powerful.
Oh yeah. I remember reading about that.
And basically just camp 1 hit points and one hit everything around you. And I think they are trying to recreate that energy.
Yeah, because you had the very simple combat choice of going for the max ranged mastery path, which gave 100% accuracy along the way. So you just need to find the hardest hitting ranged weapon. Boo, you're done. You have a usable combat that can be used anywhere. Versus, people who completely turned it on your head, like you said, with the Darox builds and whatnot.
Yeah.
The other thing that people noted is that sailing will not be included in this league. And
look, there's a lot of hate around this. I understand the decision. So the decision isn't necessarily based in technical reasons. It's really based on they don't want people coming in and just flying to sailing and not experiencing it the way that it's intended. I think it is completely valid what they're saying. They're basically saying, for 12 months after a skill release, it's not going to be included in temporary.
And I agree with that, because you can look at it in terms of how would you do the regions of the seas as an example of one problem. What extra benefits would sailing provide to the league that might not necessarily have been anticipated the first time around? And when you look at it from that way, if you add sailing to a league, you could really base a league around the seas and do it with sailing if you wanted to do such a thing in that. So I get the I get the decision that was made, and I think it's fine.
Yep. One of the fun details is that, of course, like grandmother in a cage is a very common recurring meme on the old school Reddit. In this league, so we're gonna get the sage in a cage. So yeah, Yama is really taking over this league. I think it's a fun way to keep things fresh. I'm looking forward to it as always. Right now, I'm a little bit like, leagues, another one, but I know that the moment the teasers start going in, I know my brain is going to start firing, and I'm going to be sucked in, and there's going to be 2 months of all my free time gone.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
I feel like the RS3 League has provided me some training in a way in that I finally have a method for myself. I think that if I apply that to old school, I'll be able to not hate the process along the way as I did in the previous one. So we'll see. One of the rewards also that you can get from this one, pending poll, is a demonic throne override for your POH.
Yep.
I like the way that one looks. Also overrides for thralls. I don't want to go into thralls right now.
Amazing. The thrall overrides look amazing. The imps.
Yeah.
It's definitely up there and like among the best leagues rewards you've ever seen.
Weapon ornamental kits, and when you consider this, you can buy all these after the fact with GE money, or you can just play the game and away you go and get them that way. But that'll be sometime in April alongside Easter. I feel like need to mention that. But anything else on demonic pacts before we move on to the next item?
Nope.
Okay. Well, given the size of the next one, and I think how much discourse that one is going to draw, I'm going to thank our Patreon supporters right now before we get into that. So this week, that is Alvaro L, Amos Reed, Arvids L, Bambino, Bladecom, Chilbura, Dominic R, Duramax, Gila Fleur, Imperialis, Jade Gizmo, Jason S, Jesse W, Julia W, Kesky, Lemon Lodge, Luminos, Matt Man, Mighty Myth, Michelle M, Mike Wings, Mongrath, Pernacius, Ricky A, Robbie D, Rob Sov, Samuel FL, Scott DS, Shirt Pants, Psy Oasis, Smavin, Snail Mage, Tabby, The Naked Captain, The Dabbing Goat, Tim, Ukulele Steve, Woody, Zand, and Zazakon. Big, huge thank you, everybody. This is how the show keeps going, amongst other things. Patreon.com/RSBNB. Right now, Patreon members are voting for the next monthly bit. It's looking like it's going to be a discussion on remastered content, so that one will drop tail end of next week or early week after that, and we'll talk about our ideas for remastering 3 pieces of content in the game. So if you want to hear that, you can head on over to patreon.com/RSBNB and sign up for as little as $1 a month. In addition to that monthly bit library now of 90 plus bonus shows, you'll also, of course, be helping to keep RSBNB Update going. We then have our community tier for $3 a month, where you will get a shout out at the start of the month and access to high quality stereo versions of the show. And with that being the community tier, you'll help us with monthly bit ideas from time to time, have the option of submitting discussion topics, and attending our community nights. We also then have the insider tier for $5 a month. You'll get a weekly shout out on the show and access to our expanded clip archive and outtakes. And with that, of course, you'll also have the option of receiving the Patreon Christmas card at the end of the year in December if you remain subscribed. So patreon.com/RSBNP. Thanks so much, everybody. Really looking forward to doing this remastered content monthly bit. We'll see exactly where we go and if we have the same ideas as the rest of you in the listener base there. But thanks so much, everyone. Okay, sailing and combat for boats.
Yeah.
That was the title. Our title of the sailing episode was Wiggle Your Boat, because that was the combat methodology that was seen as the best way forward for doing combat. At the end of December, we got a message from Jagex that they were aware that sailing combat needed a lot of work. So this spring, they'll be tackling boat combat with what they're calling the boat combat rework. Okay. What do you think of this? What needs to be done?
Look, I don't know about combat. Like, I stand by my opinion that they should have launched without it. I don't know if the skill needs it, though I understand why it exists. The challenge that they have right now that they describe in the post is that they are currently threading this line between making sailing combat actually interesting and unique and making it not a fourth combat style. So, which, fair enough. And I think right now it sort of floats, no pun intended, in the middle between those two. So that's why we are going to start seeing, basically they're going to get rid of a whole bunch of exceptions. So you'll be able to start wearing ranged gear, which increases your accuracy and damage from cannons. And they're also,
which a lot of people don't know.
Well, right now you can't wear ranged armor. It doesn't make a difference, right?
Yeah.
Also, there is currently a restriction so that if you use normal weapons from the boat, like a staff or a bow, it actually reduces your damage significantly. They're going to get rid of that exception.
Is that documented?
Yeah, that's documented.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're going to reduce that. They're going to get rid of that exception entirely, which unfortunately, for the time being, means we're going to get to a point where if you have a shadow, it's called a mega rare in old school. Basically, all 3 styles have what we call a mega rare. It's like the main reward from the 3 raids, and it's like the best in slot item for the 3 styles. So for magic, it's the shadow,
Tumakan
which
Shadow.
is Tumakan Shadow, which is Okay, I know this is a slight tangent, but I think some people that enjoy combat might like to actually hear how Timic and Shadow works. But the way that Timic and Shadow work, and I need to remember very well because I don't quite remember it, but I think it scales based on the magic bonus damage you get on your armor. The problem is this basically creates some kind of quadratic formula where if you increase like your magic damage and then also use a shadow, like it sort of scales ridiculously, which is why the shadow is completely cracked in much of old school right now. Anyway, if you use a shadow on a boat, it will be better than any cannons. And a lot of people might not be like, but why? That makes no sense.
Right, and philosophically, you question if that should be okay.
But I think the reasoning that they give that, how would a standard dragon cannon beat out a mega rare to begin with?
Yeah.
And basically this will give them space to have some kind of sailing mega rare drop in the future. Probably not in the next year.
The railgun.
Probably not in Raids 4. But at some point they might. And that's...
If they sail into space, they could add a railgun.
Yeah. That being said, the cannon is still going to be a really good weapon. It's going to have a lot of oomph. That's what they want to do with it. They want to give it make it a little bit slower, but have like a big oomph. So for like a lot of people, it will still be a viable and good option.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah. So does this put let's shop this out for a minute. Does this create then a world where one of the best methods of doing combat on a boat following these updates will be to bring your best combat armor rather than relying on the boat?
So what they're saying is that on the average progression, like if you look at an account progressing sort of at with ranged levels and sailing levels simultaneously, they expect it to switch back and forth a little bit. That's what they're aiming to balance against.
Okay.
Of course, at some point when you have a dragon cannon on your boat, that sort of stops, and then you start going into like all of these high tier range drops, and at that point, yes, classic combat is going to run away. But we can't afford to design sailing combat just against endgame players when there isn't any endgame sailing content yet.
That makes a lot of sense, because you don't necessarily know 2-3 years down the line what an endgame sailing boss is going to look like and what it's going to need.
So I think it is a very fair thing to say that what they're doing right now is they're going to make sailing combat less useful in a sense, right? Fewer people are going to use it, but it will allow them to grow
onto your existing combat gear.
Yeah.
To do the combat things you want to do from your boat.
Exactly. It makes the current experience better. It makes people get value out of the items that they bought or earned. But like if you're an Iron Man and you don't have these mega rares, or you're not as confident in doing raids, then a dragon cannon is still going to hit the sharks out of the water.
Literally.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that's a good compromise, because sailing is not meant to be a combat skill, so you shouldn't necessarily have to go in with the best combat gear to be effective in sailing. I don't think.
Yeah.
Like a skill peer, as much as the snowflake accounts like skill peers and whatnot shouldn't dominate the conversation. It's a good example in this case, because if you took a skill peer that was doing sailing, they would be able to do
combat.
They would not be able to if they lean too heavily into that. No.
And look, you can still use crew on your cannons as well. The moment you start using your own combat gear and you use crew on the cannons, they're basically, as Jagex describes them, super powered thralls, where And I think again, I think it does create an interesting, do you want to spend cannonballs on this to increase your kill times?
Yeah,
I do think it creates interesting trade-offs.
what do you think about this idea of splitting
I think it makes sense.
the
They should
balls
have been
from
split to begin
sailing
with.
and
I
that?
split the balls. Look, they should have split to begin with. I think it creates confusion. I would love for them to be the same, but I think that needs to be.
And
I
to
think
me,
it needs
this
to
always
flow
made
the other way.
sense. This always made sense that they should have been different.
Yeah, and I think if they actually ever want to integrate them, it should flow the other direction. I think.
Yeah,
I think they should be
yeah.
looking at can we use, but yeah,
Can you use sailing cannonballs in the dwarf multi-cannon rather than the other way around?
yeah.
Okay. We'll see where this lands, because I, still, being like almost 70 sailing, still haven't really interacted with combat at all, and I don't feel the need to.
I do have good news in so far that you won't have to wiggle your boat anymore. They are going to add and change around some of the hotspots to allow you to have two cannons on the same side of the boat.
Broadsiding.
That being said, you will still only be limited to two cannons on your boat in total. So
so no
you can
big,
sort of decide.
no big, huge.
No, exactly.
Dreadnought broadside. Skiff.
So you can decide, do you want to deal with the current system, or would you rather just always have the same side of your boat facing the enemy? And
yeah. We'll see where this lands. I'm still not 100% convinced on this.
Look, I don't know if
does it make you feel better?
No, well, yes, better, but still not good about the combat thing. And yeah, but we'll see.
All right, fair enough. Anything else sailing combat wise?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I was wondering, where exactly things are going to go on this, and the question of, well, what else is coming this quarter is going to be of note. But this was effectively the spring season.
Yeah, the spring season is unfortunately very, very light this time around. So we were expecting to get the Blood Moon Rises, which we'll talk about later.
I was thinking that would be April, but it's not.
Yeah, it was meant to be early this year. That got pushed back. Yeah, no, that's it. That's spring.
Okay. And I think if you stick the landing on the Cow Boss Leagues and then the changes to boat combat, I think that creates a compelling launch schedule despite what folks have said.
I think it's light, right? I think it is completely fair to say.
But it's still compelling.
Yes, I don't think people will be bored necessarily, but I do think it is fair to say that in context of, we no longer have basically everybody like heads down on sailing anymore on the sailing launch. Having both winter and spring basically only have one big update each in the roadmap and a temporary game mode each. I understand why it leaves a sour taste in people's mouth.
And I mean, to turn it back to the RS3 side, not everybody in old school is running around with accounts that are near max. They're able to get there in a blink of an eye.
Oh, look, sure. It is, for me, it's nice. Like it's a opportunity to catch up and do some things. But at the same time, even I start feeling my motivation wane when there's just no new content coming out, because that keeps things fresh. That keeps sort of a certain momentum. And if that sort of stops.
Oh yeah, I know what that's like, both from the player side and trying to produce content for shows.
And usually we sort of got around this in old school, because I'll like every year around December and January, the content mill sort of dries up a little bit because of all of the vacations. So that's when we used to have leagues.
But now it's in April.
And look, maybe in the middle of leagues, there will not be as many content updates, and that's fine. Everybody will be busy with leagues. Plus, I think this will be a really interesting period where we're going to start seeing the blogs and the design happening for some of the updates we're going to be talking about. I realize I've been spoiling like whole
No, that's
stuff
fine.
we're going to
Let's
talk
move on.
about,
Let's
but
move on to summer right now then, and continue some of the discussions around this. They're doing another round of summer sweep up changes. Inform the listeners on exactly what a summer sweep up is and why, we might even be seeing something like that on RS3.
So the summer sweep up is basically a big load of integrity changes. Many of them are unpolled, though some of them are. 2 years ago, so 2024, we had something called Project Rebalance. And Project Rebalance was a big shift in how combat works.
We got lots of flack. You remember those episodes?
Yeah. So we got, for example, elemental weaknesses. So certain enemies are weak against a certain element of magic. Which sort of started creating differentiation between the different magic spells, but also gave standard spells a reason to be used again over ancient spells. So that is the kind of changes we had. We also got the introduction of flat armor, which basically reduces or adds, if it's negative flat armor, damage to each hit, which created a very little interesting thing in that sometimes you want to have a weapon that hits multiple times and gets its damage split into multiple hit splats versus like a big two-handed weapon that's slow but does a lot of damage at the same time, because that way you can sort of play with like the flat armor bonus. So it's really interesting. We have a set of bosses that's basically a modern version of Barrows. It's 3 different bosses. One of them has a negative flat armor bonus. You want to use like a two-handed weapon that hits twice.
You're talking about the moons, right?
I'm talking about the moons, yeah. Whereas a different boss has a positive flat armor bonus, and you want to use like a slow two-handed weapon instead. So that's sort of the kind of stuff.
I realize this sounds very complicated on the surface of it, but once you dive into some of the numbers on it, it's really not that bad, and it provides for some really good gameplay experiences.
So this is just one of the things they did, and what this created is like, first of all, it created a whole bunch of new reward space. All of a sudden we have multiple weapons that are in like the same level tier, but they have different use cases. But also it just creates a more interesting and healthy game with more strategy. The summer sweep up last year, they went in, they cleaned up a whole bunch of things, they added more elemental weaknesses. And that was such a success that they're now looking to make this a recurring yearly thing.
One of the ones that they mentioned on the post that came from last year's sweep up was individual Slayer Master block lists.
Yeah, so I would argue that Slayer in Old School is now strictly better than Slayer in RuneScape because...
Well, I mean, when you consider the fact that the 120 Slayer update for RS3 asked you to take a Pokedex and go get souls from everything.
But yeah, no, basically they changed it so that every Slayer Master has its own block list, which is very nice because people tend to use different Slayer Masters for different reasons, right? Some of them for points, some of them for XP, and you might want to have a very different block list for those. So that's interesting.
And they didn't give any insight on what those changes are going to be. They just said expect to see skilling improvements, combat QL tweaks, and perhaps some like gear rebalancing and a smattering of smaller changes that are bound to be the belle of the bullet point ball. So
they did do Slayer. What else did they do? I'm just trying to see if I can find some of the other things that they did for the summer sweep.
Tombs improvements.
They made huge improvements to one of the raids, make that a lot more accessible.
Loot tables changes.
Loot table changes. So a lot of these things are sort of integrity changes as well.
And see, that's the difference, folks, is that these sorts of things have been happening for the last few years with regular cadence on OS. But when we did the integrity monthly bit at the start of the month here, we went back to the start of 2021, 5 years, and we found a handful of changes that would fit into a kind of like a sweep up kind of mold for that. So they don't really happen that often on RS3. And getting these sorts of changes in, I think I was amazed when we were doing things like Project Rebalance, is that I was expecting there to be more of a community pushback on that, but it landed relatively well, I think.
Yeah, look, a lot of the other summer sweep up stuff is things like not needing a key anymore for some of the bosses, and like it removes a lot of unnecessary toil. And I think this shows
like we're talking like Slayer bosses, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this shows sort of a philosophical difference between RuneScape and old school.
Yes.
And I think RuneScape is going to do better and sort of transform into this, in that old school is much more willing to go back to existing pieces of content and be like, okay, shake the box a little bit. Like, what didn't work? Like, what have we learned in the past 5 years that we can apply to this? And just instead of continuously resaturating the game with like new updates that sort of replace the old stuff, but the old stuff is still around, sort of being like super jank, and the only people interacting with it are like cloggers, because they need to 100% everything. I think this is a much more economical way to ensure that the entire experience beginning to end is good.
Yeah. And that if I'm going to ask people to take one thing away from it, it would be this, that, these sorts of updates don't always have to be controversial, as long as they're backed up with good reason and the take also provides some give. I think what the OS team has shown is that you're able to provide these things and, get them through, without a poll even in this game, so that, the discussion that comes forward with something like RS3 that doesn't have polls allows them to happen relatively successfully, hopefully. We also have the Red Reef, and I think this is, another bit of content that people were looking forward to and were wondering when this was going to arrive, and this is the continuation of the sailing storyline.
Yeah, the Tortugan storyline. Yeah, that again, it was pushed back because of the boat combat rework, and
boat combat rework's more important.
Yeah, it is, and I think the choice is valid, but between the Blood Moon Rises and the Red Reef being pushed back, you start seeing why the first half of the year has started to feel so empty, because sort of the big pillar pieces of content that were meant to land in that area have both been pushed back.
But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to know if we want to preempt this now about what the upshot of this whole roadmap's going to be. The content is there. It comes down to presentation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We didn't get a chance to talk about the first Tortugan quest. I thought it was interesting. I'm not necessarily, expecting this to be like the next elf storyline. How do you feel about the Tortugans? I
think it's fine. I think it's an interesting one. I understand why it exists, but also
sailing needed some story content, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is what they're calling experience level, 52 sailing and 48 smithing, which really isn't that bad. Considering I think the first one was 45 sailing, the first sailing quest that was story based. So
yeah. And the sailing levels in the mid-game are incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Like, sailing has a weird curve where it starts slow, then it is really fast before it sort of slows down again. But overall, it's a much flatter progression curve.
And that's why they're able to give 15,000 XP, sailing XP, as a reward on this one. And more camphor tree resources. So, if anything, you're going to just do this quest and you're going to get another place to camp for.
Closer to a bank, I think, is going to be the main difference, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like that's maybe the smallest beat that we've discussed thus far up to this point. So the other thing that is coming sailing wise this summer is the player designed island.
Yeah, they promised this as part of sailing. They had 1,400 or 1,500 entries, I think.
Wow.
I didn't end up submitting mine, even though I had
I
one.
I wasn't moved by many of these, if I'm being honest. What was yours going to be?
Mine was going to be, I hadn't really figured out the lore yet, but I was thinking of making some kind of ship wharf, so more of a floating like island, because I wanted
A
something more
flotilla.
industrial. Yeah, I wanted something more industrial because the two pieces of content I wanted to do is I wanted to build an agility course that actually changes because you walk over like cranes and machinery. So like that moves around. So like every few laps, you have to actually change and pay attention to what the new route is. Similar to like the head agility course, right? We have the shortcuts, except for less shortcuts and more like just route changes. I thought that would be interesting. The other thing I was going to do is like the equivalent of like construction contracts, but for boats, because I think the game sorely needs a sink for some of the boat parts. Because right now you can make them,
Yeah.
but you can't sink them, so they have no value.
Yeah.
So the market is going to be flooded.
I was looking at doing, I didn't get on sailing quick enough. I was looking at doing this in like the second and third week of sailing.
I did some of this.
And
I
almost did it, but I missed the market opportunity. And the reason I didn't do it is because I didn't have plank make to make the planks economically.
Oh yeah, I got like 5 magic levels and a whole bunch of money from plank making for like a week or two straight. And I think even now it's still profitable, just not as profitable as it was
it's
like
just
the
a question
first
of getting to plank.
But like I had people in the clan get basically 99 smithing and 99 construction for almost free.
Okay, so that's what could have been. Gonna be real here. None of these player designed islands really spoke to me. So I just went based on vibes and some of the training methods that were available. So if we're gonna list them 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of the way they're presented in the post, I voted 1, 2, 4, 3, which I think was the same as your ordering.
Yeah, it's the same as mine. I just don't care about the slime theme. I think it's very different and very unique. But also the activities just really didn't speak to me.
And the reason I voted for the one that was first is that I just really liked the vibe of what was presented here with an island based on the Faroe Islands and verticality.
Yeah, I loved the Wormscrag, the second one. The vibes of that, the thematic vibes, like the basalt columns are really, really, really cool. I think they're very unique. Unfortunately, the activities just didn't feel quite as interesting to me. Like, and I think
I like the idea of crafting
option,
activities in both those.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think the first one has slightly better comments. And look, I've been to Scotland, I've been to Iceland, I've been to Norway. I'm going to Norway again very soon. I just that vibe, I love it. So I would love to see something like that in the game.
Very good, very good, very good. Oh boy, I just pressed a button I shouldn't have pressed. We're good. Yes. Still getting the hang of the video sometimes in that way. Okay. In addition to that, also coming in the summer is what I think a lot of people were hoping for, the Blood Moon Rises, the finality to the Myrag Vampire series, which took a different turn than the RS3 Vampire series did, which, you know, at the end of Sins of the Father, which is the penultimate quest leading up to this, really, I don't know, Night at the Theater feels more like an epilogue to that. But
no, Sins of the Father is
the one that comes before, and we could say this because we got a kick out of this at the last RuneFest announcement when it was announced, and Mod Ed was on stage and talking about my wreck being dead, and he actually got cheers in the audience from one person on that, and this is where that quest picks up. So, okay. Requires multiple skills at 70 plus and a recommended combat level of 110 plus. I want to hone in on that right now, because the highest recommended right now is 95 with Desert Treasure 2.
Yeah.
So this continues the old school trend of putting meaningful bosses in quests.
Yeah.
We
talk
about that, the rewards,
the quest cape in old school is definitely a much harder achievement than in RS3, despite RS3 having more quests, because I think
RS3s are locked behind stats. Old schools is locked behind actual content within those quests.
Yeah, look, not to diminish people who are stuck on some of the quest bosses, like they're not necessarily easy, but like the quest cape in old school requires you to finish one of the raids. In story mode, yes, but that's still not a push.
Yeah, which is
because you still have to deal with all of the mechanics.
When we're looking at it at the base level, we're looking at what, like level 70-ish gear with range probably to do that?
You can do that particular story mode with just a full range setup, but you are looking at base 60, 70 gear for sure.
And when we got the Amasket finale in RS3 this past summer, I was mentioning that maybe we take a page from OS and put in a difficult boss in that regard, because the Amasket boss fight in that boss was not even story mode Amasket that was released, because it requires multiple people. So I mean, I'm of two minds on that. One, you do your quests in a way that let people experience the story and make them as accessible as they can for story, but at the same time, with the changes that are supposedly coming for combat, maybe the old school method is something that could be brought over in that way, because I know a lot of people, it's a rite of passage doing things like Dragon Slayer 2, Desert Treasure 2, and now of course the Blood Moon Rises here.
Yes, absolutely. I think we all, especially if you've played the game for a long time, we all remember the build-up to Dragon Slayer, to killing Elvark. That was not an easy fight, especially if you did it back in the day. These days, who bloody cares, right? But back in the day, that was not an easy fight. That was sort of the culmination of things. To me, that quest has more value, whether it's nostalgic or in general, because of that struggle being introduced. If all of the Desert Treasure 2 bosses were easy, then I don't think as many people would be saying that Desert Treasure 2 is their favorite quest.
Yeah, and then
it's a good quest in terms of lore, but the fact that it is interspersed with these really difficult challenges you have to overcome, the sense of relief, that emotion of finally making it to that final cutscene, making it to that final fight, because you are pumped up with adrenaline, I think gives that ending the emotional impact that it deserves.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, if you're not doing it from the combat side, the other option, for better or worse, depending on how it's implemented, is to really just amp up the storytelling, and in some cases have it be larger than life.
Yeah,
which they work in their own silos, and it's dealer's choice to what you prefer at the end of the day.
And like I said at the start of the episode, I'm a mechanics driven person.
Yeah.
Right? I used to be a questing person, And I still do. I love the lore. I love the storytelling, but it is the mechanics and the fact that my struggle is my character's struggle, right? I'm a huge sucker for anything that makes me feel what the character should feel, because that creates a connection that only games can do. Books can't, movies can't, plays can't,
Fair.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're a passive, you're not a participant, right? You're an observer. But in a game, you're a participant. Anything that does that, I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing, aside from that in Blood Moon Rises, there's 2 new weapons that are on the way. I don't necessarily know that we need to go into the minor details of those, but the biggest thing that is going to be coming from this is Vampyrium.
Yeah, basically we're gonna get a whole new area, new plane or whatever that has.
Have they said how
activities,
big it's going to be?
No, they haven't. But I think I said something to you in pre-show that I will repeat, because I don't think I'm going to be too far off by comparing Vampyrium to Prithdinis.
Which I don't think a lot of people thought of when Blood Moon Rises was first announced.
No. And look, I am not as hyped for Vampyrium because I have never really cared for that aesthetic and that theme.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where the game is going to get things like Bloodwood trees, a few different ranged arrows, amongst other things. Then there's a different kind of tree thing, or a new tree.
Yeah, the Seeker arrows. What?
Why do they make everything so hard to say? The hunter creature.
The Stimfikes? Stimfikes?
Okay.
I don't know.
Sorry.
The Seeker arrows, by the way, are, again, horizontal content. You can replace all of your arrows with Seeker arrows, which make the arrows have suddenly like an accuracy bonus. Right? Like all of a sudden,
because previously accuracy bonuses came from your bow.
Yeah.
And your arrows arrows and bolts were just how much you hit.
Bow accuracy, arrow strength. That tended to be the trade-off, yeah.
Yeah. And I can see there will be applications where you're going to want to do this. So there we go.
But yeah, there's going to be a repeatable boss. The Maggot King looks absolutely lovely. New best in slot ranged amulet. So, nothing too big. It's going to be interesting. I wonder how dangerous Vampyrium is going to be. And if it is dangerous, to me, it might be a prototype of what the wilderness could have been. And I know this is a very spicy take, but...
And I think the thing is, when you go into those sorts of environmental things, or at least the things that are procedurally activated that feel environmental, it's like, how do you do such a thing like that if they're going to go that path with this without it being annoying?
Yep, and we'll have to see. And look, maybe it's not actually going to be dangerous, and it's just like a big red plane.
Like if I was a quester and if I was up to date on all my quests and everything in the roadmap, this would be the big piece of content of the year. Because coming into this roadmap, nobody anticipated that there would be this much in Vampyrium.
And this is why it got pushed back.
And maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but I haven't seen people yelling from the rooftops over this past week about Vampyrium.
Yeah, I think people haven't made that connection yet, that I said that it might just be the new Prith in a sense for certain. I mean, it's not going to be as...
No, it's not as iconic, right?
And it doesn't have banks and shops maybe, and it's not going to be like... But it's still, yeah, I could see it being a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to presentation. That is not really how they're presenting it right now. That being said, before we move on to the next topic, if you watch any video, any of the videos, watch this one because the Blood Moon Rises video is positively hilarious.
Oh, I can imagine, just based on the thumbnail they went with
Oh no.
Not that one?
They went full infomercial style about why you should go on a vacation to Vampyrium.
I mean, that wouldn't be everyone's first destination, right?
Just watch the video and maybe you'll be convinced.
Okay. We'll leave that as an exercise for the listeners. So before we, move on to autumn and everyone's question of, what comes next and, what's going to be announced at RuneFest with this, what has been our recurring theme here up to this point in terms of what has been? We have laid out the content point by point by point. And from this perspective, there's a lot of it, and it's a different sense than you probably got from the summit. But there has been a big, huge discussion on temporary game modes and community events. Are they leaning into that too much?
Okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of speculation here. And I don't like usually doing this.
You don't like it, I like it. Yes.
So I'm going to indulge you for a moment on this, which is when we talked about Deadman and we talked about the concept of esports, and we think about this whole event that's happening in Chicago. Look, you could say, our American players have been asking for a US event for all of these years, and we finally, from the very good of our heart, are going to give it to them.
Yeah.
That's a very naive way of looking at
it.
And
very simplistic. I will give you that.
And I am not that naive anymore. I've grown a little bit cynical over the last few years. There's money in esports.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you look at the start of the Winter Summit, they talk about Deadman, they talk about a collaboration they did with like a hardware creator, they talk about some merch that they did a collaboration with. I'm purposely not saying the brands, they don't deserve the exposure in my opinion. And they kept going back to this throughout the show. It is very in line with what the rest of the world is going through: sponsorships, advertisements, collaborations. And I find it very hard to see this in isolation. If you think about a roadmap for a different game by the same company that shares a good chunk of the name with Old School RuneScape, that very specifically is reducing the opportunities for monetization. And it makes me think that, as much as Old School needs to be and remain a healthy game with regular content drops, which we are getting, this is still an amazing year. There are, and actually, the number of players of Old School is actually still growing. We're still breaking records of player counts every few weeks, and it's not even leagues, right? Sure, if you want to be cynical, you can say half of that is bots.
It's not
maybe.
Half.
Maybe.
My conservative estimate on that is 20%.
But even then, the numbers are still going up. We still have regular bot waves, ban waves, I should say, not bot waves. I think, there's still growth in subscription revenue, but for a company, that is not good enough at some point. You want to look for alternative avenues of monetization. We're never going to get microtransactions, but esports, there's money in esports. And I think Leagues is in April because it fills a void that would otherwise have fallen there.
Okay, so let's set that one off to the side for the time being.
Right? I think
Yeah.
it is just clever planning. I think they might have gone for June if it weren't for the fact that there's nothing else landing in spring, really, except for boat combat improvements. Deadman and the focus on that and all of that, I feel, is falling into that. And I think the forums, specifically Reddit, but also my clan, where we talk about this stuff, these are people that don't consume the esports side.
You're entirely right on that. Entirely right.
They consume the content. And now it becomes a question, who is the summit pandering to?
And then from that perspective, everything makes sense. Because we have just gone over the content list, and it's voluminous, especially when you get to the Blood Moon Rises. And everything else, you know, with Cow Boss and Leagues and Islands and Sweep-Ups.
Look, I have things to say about the summit as a whole, and I will leave these comments to the very end as a conclusion.
Yeah.
But I came out of the summit a little bit disappointed, and again, I will explain it at the very end. But I don't think we should be or have to be.
I think that makes sense, especially with you mentioning esports. And just how prolific a lot of those categories are on, you know, YouTube, Twitch, and, you know, even in the real world.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's a good diversion. And then with that, we go back to sailing because, you know, people were saying, well, what else is sailing getting this year? In the fall, we're slated to get the next Barracuda Trial. And for people unaware what these are, this is the click-intensive, lean-forward sailing training method. Probably my second favorite part of the skill, which absolutely blew you away when I mentioned that.
The Barracuda Trial hits all of the right parts of PVM without having to deal with PVM. Yeah, I honestly, I don't know how I can explain Barracuda Trials. You have to play them, but it is the closest that I don't know. It's the closest that RuneScape gets to a racing game. I don't know, like
Mario Kart.
Maybe. The Barracuda Trials are amazing because they reward understanding game mechanics. If you understand how ticks work, if you understand how boat movement works, you understand curve radii, if you understand all of this, then you can get really good at this. People were speedrunning the Barracuda Trials for weeks after release. I think it has settled down now because I think they've basically got it tick perfect at this point, unless they find a new route or a new trick.
Which is not likely at this point, I don't think.
No. People are doing speedruns on the tick level in RuneScape. That's what I want you to take away from this, right? I know, like, bosses always have a level of randomness to them, and I know we do like fast times on bosses, but I've never seen a race like the speedruns of the Barracuda Trials.
Yeah, and honestly,
the Barracuda Trials are the biggest surprise in any RuneScape game I've ever encountered.
And honestly, for me, the thing that sold them for me was the ability to have something that I can work on my own, but still have some kind of leaderboard, whether it be hitting the requisite times or a community leaderboard to 100% chase and better myself with the ability to get feedback in-game of what I can do better, whether that be, you know, mechanical things like upgrading the boat to whatever, tiers it needs to be at my sailing level, or whether it be, clicking on the right spots, or maybe taking this corner and that corner a little bit sooner, or in a different way. That's the kind of thing that speaks to me. Because one of the things I'll still do on Star Trek Online when I'm not, engrossed in the daily system over there, the dailies, is I'll do DPS chasing, and I was doing a bit of that this week. And in terms, like, we have these community run leaderboards, and what I did this week is I went from rank 48 to rank 31 in the solo boards over there. So that's something that I enjoy doing, and if I can have something like that in RS, that's great.
Yeah, Barracuda Trials are, I think, the only thing in RuneScape ever that has made me, all right, let's do half an hour of Barracuda Trials before bed. Shit, it's 1 a.m. Because it has that energy of just one more try, right? I want to get that time. Just one more. It's only 5 minutes. One more. And yes, RuneScape tick system, it's jank. And I know a lot of people are like, can we finally get rid of the tick system?
No, but once you learn it, it makes sense. Once
you learn it, like, one of the first ever monthly bits we did was about the evolution of combat.
That was bit 1.
And why people... It was bit 1 even, yes. And why people like it. And it opened my eyes to people like, I love the fact that I can learn about the tick system, and that when you feel that sense of mastery, that gives... PVM has a pretty high barrier to entry, right? First of all, it's dangerous. You require gear, you require a whole bunch of skills. Barracuda Trials have no barrier to entry. It is just, you need a ship that's good enough, and you're going to get those ship upgrades anyway. The barrier to entry is very low. To get the first Barracuda Trial, you need oak masts, that's all. And I think, oak masts and an oak helm. Sorry, you need those 2 things. That's it.
And their teaser image
you can't use a raft. You can't use a raft.
No, of course not. You wouldn't want to. Their teaser image for this says, "Get in, loser. We're going sailing."
Yes. They don't know yet what the theme is going to be, where it's going to be, what it's going to be like. But they basically said, we're going to learn from what we learned from the previous trials, what worked and what didn't, and make the best one yet. And I can't wait. This is why I'm not 99 sailing yet. I want to be there when it releases. I want to have a reason to grind out this new trial.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is one of the highlights of the roadmap for me, because Barracuda Trials, love it.
I realized that was a lot of words. I get it. I don't know if other people do, but I get it. I'm trying to think if there's a different way of explaining it, but I don't know that there is. No. Alrighty.
I think one thing that we might have missed in the main notes that is also happening in autumn is there's going to be a sequel quest. Basically, we're going to get a sequel to any of the existing storylines, and it probably involves pirates, though it is not entirely sure yet that it involves pirates.
It couldn't be gnomes, could it?
Unlikely.
Because I feel like that one's pretty far along that you wouldn't reserve this slot for it.
Yeah, exactly. So we're thinking probably pirates. Might also be penguins, though.
That would work.
That would also work. So yeah, we don't know yet, but we're going to get a sequel quest to one of the existing storylines. From what I understand, they haven't really started on this yet either. So it's all still up in the air.
Penguins.
More quests, good.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Penguins. There is another option out there.
Elemental Workshop?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Elemental Workshop 3.
No, that has nothing to do with sailing. I don't see that. as going to be a
Oh, it
sailing
has to
mod.
be tied. It has to have a sailing element.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Also in autumn, the community bingo feature is arriving, which takes after the Gridmaster trial that they ran last year. So everybody now will be able to run their own community clan bingo events as they want to. I don't necessarily know if it'll be as involved as Gridmaster was, but I think any kind of support for the community bingo is a good thing, because we looked at this when it first started as a game jam project, and I think when you look at the communities that are around in game, to have a feature like this where you can say we're just running this over a weekend, that might just be a good thing to have, just as something in the back pocket, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
From what I can tell, the very least it will do is track certain bingo things, like kill a certain thing, get a certain amount of XP, get a certain, and that already will make it so much more interesting, I think, to run these events in the context of a clan.
I wonder if you'll be able to limit it, to say I want this to be, just a gathering skill bingo. Could something like that be done? I wonder.
Yeah, probably.
So that would be interesting. All right. Then we get to winter and beyond, which is where we start, things start to get a little whimsical and hand wavy, because we don't exactly know what this is going to look like. But I think the thing that is most set in stone here is the next raid, the Fractured Archive, which will require While Gothic Sleeps as a requirement, which was a big point of community contention this week, specifically around defense requirements.
Look, I think the biggest reveal is the theme of the raid.
Guthixian Archives.
There's been a lot of discussion. Is it going to be like a snowy one? Where it's going to be located? I don't think that a lot of people had Guthixian Archives as on their bingo cards.
No, I'm really compelled by this. I've not done any of the raids, but I'm really compelled by this strictly from a lore standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think this is super interesting. The concept art has similar vibes to the area from the World Wakes in RS3, which makes sense, but it also has like a lot of naturey stuff. It will have a boss based on the very, very early Guthix designs, if you remember the skull.
Yes, that's right. That was like in RS Classic concept art.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's gonna be one of the raids bosses is gonna be based on that design of Guthix. They know what the players want on this. I think this is super compelling, like you said. I think it is super interesting.
They're gonna stick the landing on the combat side. There's no question about that.
They've already started working on it. They've already started playtesting.
Yeah. Right.
Just to this is gonna take like almost another year to land, and they're already playtesting the combat stuff. That being said, they have said this is going to be the most difficult raid so far, because of course power creep, even though it's slower and old school, it is a thing, and they want to make it challenging for people with modern gear.
What would you say the most difficult existing one is? Is that theater?
Ooh, I don't know. I think this is a really
like
tough
if we're just
question.
looking at base normal mode without any of the levers you can pull.
Normal mode?
Yeah.
Like if you look at normal mode of all of the three, I think Tombs is probably the most accessible one.
Yeah.
And Fears of Blood is probably the hardest one. Yes.
Okay. And then I imagine that changes greatly in hard modes.
Yeah, I don't know if Fears of Blood has a hard mode. It probably does, though I'm not familiar with it. Tombs of a Mascot is interesting because it basically scales indefinitely, and probably full invocation, like highest rate level TOA, is probably the hardest rate you're going to get. That being said, challenge mode, Cox, if you do like high scaling, which you can do, right? Like you can scale it for more people, but do it solo, it's also going to be very difficult. But then it largely comes down to just lots of hit points and, attrition. But mechanically, I think max rate level TOA is going to be the most difficult.
Yeah. Okay. And, we don't know, where they're going for rewards on this. There's no, poll about rewards. I think the only thing that they're polling is, should we add this raid, which, is definitely going to pass with like 98% yes, probably.
Yeah, it's also interesting how they're going to approach the launch on this, right? So basically raids over time, they have been made very accessible. That being said, if your party wipes, you can usually just redo the current boss rather than to have to start from the start. And you get a bunch of supplies to sort of make sure you have a fighting chance. That being said, when they release this, they're going to basically have a temporary time where if you wipe as a team, that's a full reset. They're also going to they're not going to be starting with an entry mode. That's not going to be there on release.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And basically what they really want to focus in on launch is very similar to a mascot, is make this a race, right? Like give everybody an equal ground and then sort of build up the accessibility features later and over time, which I think is very fair. It probably also means I will not be doing this on launch. I'll probably be waiting until this is a little bit less punishing. Give it a try. I might give it a try. It depends, but yeah.
You had it on you had it on your 2026, 2025 goal list to complete a raid.
Oh yeah,
which you went way beyond that. So I mean, come on,
absolutely.
You'll get in there.
But we'll see. This is winter. I might have actually proper endgame gear by then.
Yeah, and again, we'll see where they're at with this. Whether this means November, December, or January of 2027.
It is interesting. So Tombs of a Mascot, which is the most recent raid, you can solo it. This one, it will only skill between 2 and 8 players, so you can solo it.
But you can try to solo it.
Yeah, but it will be difficult. I do think 2 to 8 players, I think it's a good number. Soloing raids, I accept that they are a thing, but it feels not very raidy to do them solo.
No.
So I do sort of understand why they do this. It's going to be a Theater of Blood styled approach, right? It's going to be a much simpler raid, which I think is sort of sad. Theater of Blood, besides thematically being my least favorite, it just is not as interesting.
And by that you mean
it's a boss rush.
Yeah, boss rush compared to the puzzles and whatnot that might exist in Tombs.
Yeah, I think they're very contentious. I think a lot of people dislike the puzzle rooms in TOA, and just to be clear, I don't like them. But I think they are necessary to create a more interesting cadence, right? Like, think of a raid as a narrative arc where you have exciting parts and you have sort of downtime. And only with contrast can you create highs and lows. But then you go and look at like TOB, Theater of Blood, and it's just 6 bosses right after each other. And it's like from one high to another.
But I can also see a certain type of player that would prefer the Theater of Blood over the puzzles versus
So what they said on stream is that basically different people have a different raid as their favorite, but the one that people are the most passionate about is Theater of Blood, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Like that's the one that sort of stands out.
So you kind of take the cues where you can from that then.
Yeah. I am hoping that it will not be linear. So one of the things I was talking about with people that I would find interesting is a system where maybe you have to kill like 4 bosses before like a final boss, but you can choose the order in which you do the first 4 bosses, and they sort of like killing one boss makes the remaining ones stronger. So you can sort of have some interesting choice there. I think that would cut out some of the slog while still being very interesting. But yeah, we'll see. We won't get an invocation system like Tombs either, which I think is sad because it allows you to fine-tune your difficulty. Though, to be honest, the invocation system of TOA could be a whole episode talking about it by itself.
Because like you mentioned that, and that's why I asked, normal mode, and then the thing is like, how do you go from there and do something else? Like, what do you pick? And I mean, you're right, we could go into that, but I don't.
Yeah.
Think
so I mean, I will quickly summarize for people who are like, what the heck are invocations? So both Chambers of Xeric and
mutators?
Fiat of Blood. Yeah, they're basically mutators. So Chambers of Xeric and Fiat of Blood, rates 1 and 2, they have discrete difficulties, right? Tombs of a Mascot is interesting in that you start with entry mode, which is level 0. It's called raid level 0, basically. It has no extra mechanics. You get all of the base stuff. And then you can add and enable modifiers. And each modifier is worth a certain amount of levels. And if you hit 150, that's considered a normal mode.
Right. Okay.
And if you hit at least 300, that's considered an expert mode. These sort of thresholds also change sort of the loot drops, and then the loot also scales between, but these tend to be sort of the big turning points where the loot changes quite a lot.
Yeah, and just looking at that from the outside perspective, obviously there's going to be a meta in terms of the set of invocations you choose to get to.
Not really. There is not a single meta, and this is what makes the invocation system so interesting.
So really, you could just pick based on what you feel best. There's no.
If you struggle with movement,
you
pick
preferred way.
You make prayer switching harder. If you switch, if you find it hard to gear switch, you make movement harder. Like, you can sort of pick what mechanics you find easy to deal with and which not. And that makes it the most accessible raid. It's really when you get to like really high levels that the choices start becoming very, very limited, because you have to basically have everything. And then
to get back to the Fractured Archive on this, you end up in a situation where it won't have this, and it'll just be bosses, hopefully not in a linear fashion.
Yeah.
Okay.
With like probably like an entry mode, a normal mode, and maybe an expert mode. Yeah.
Alrighty. Sounds good. And then they talk about a sea expansion, which, I mean, again, hand wavy.
They don't know which sea yet, but when they launched sailing, they purposefully left certain seas empty.
Like out east.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the one out east, northeast of the wilderness makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would be good. They might also be adding more islands to existing sea, is what they said. So that's the sort of thing they might do. So Pacts are pretty empty. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And I don't know, like this was just here at the end, and I think that's really all there is to it. And let's see where sailing is at at the end of the year, basically, with that. What do you think? Do you think this is going to pass the poll? Would you like us to explore adding a sea expansion? You think that one's going to pass?
See no reason for it not to pass.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well then, let's start wrapping this up. Because what didn't we talk about here?
So I think a lot of people were expecting and hoping for updates on two things, mostly the client changes. So we were promised. So we were shown very pretty images last year of HD.
I was interested in that.
And of course, they are working on an official plugin API that hopefully eventually allows people to switch from third-party clients like RuneLite to the official client.
And I can't underscore how big of a deal that would be for OS, because one of the things that holds the game back from a cheating perspective is the need to maintain support for a Java run client, which is what RuneLite is behind the scenes. Because at this point, there's certain anti-cheat mechanics they could put into the other clients that they're not really able to with a Java-based client out there, which is what RuneLite is at the core.
Yeah. So basically, they've gotten to the point where they're like, we bit off more than we can chew. We have both HD and a plugin API running. We can't do both at the same time. We're going to do HD first. And this rang some bells. Like this is
Especially after RS3 says, oh, by the way, by the end of the year, we hope to have plugins to you on RS3.
Yeah. There's some speculation.
And what I said last week is that what world are we in where RS3 gets official plugins before OS? How does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there are people speculating, and I don't know if this is true, though I could see some truth to it, that says they basically took the plugin team from old school and moved it to RS3, which would suck, because we don't want that kind of competition between games. I think both of them should like deserve full attention. But I think a lot of people are also saying, people are not going to switch to the native client because of HD, though they might switch to the native client because of plugins.
But you need to have parity with plugins. We talked about this when it first came out, that any official client that doesn't have plugins is dead in the water. And you have to have, at the very least, the top 20, if not more, of the most common RuneLite plugins.
I run like 50. I probably run like 50 plugins at this point, right? And like some of them I could probably do without.
Yeah, and I tried. You accused me of wanting a horrible experience and wanting to do things to hate the game. But I wanted to see what the vanilla experience of OS was like last December in the official client. And the unfortunate reality is, it's not great.
No, it's not.
You need that RuneLite client at the very least, and probably some of the plugins.
Yeah, and really one of the most damning things is, like, one of the biggest things that people want from RuneLite is a plugin called Menu Entry Swapper. And basically what this allows you to do, it allows you to change, like normally you have like a right-click menu with a bunch of options, and the top one is what happens when you left-click. Menu Entry Swapper lets you change what that top one is. This is huge, right? Like all of a sudden, you can left-click bankers, you can left-click tool leprechauns, you can left-click like a whole bunch of things.
You can left-click buy 500 from the shop.
Exactly. Like it is huge what this adds. They didn't have this in the official client. They tried implementing it. It's buggy as heck, right? We have a version and it just breaks immediately. They worked on this for like multiple months and it's not even production ready yet. But they did release it after already delaying it once because they had to move on to the next thing. So there's that. There's other plugins that they sort of tried implementing in a base, but they don't even get close to the plugin fidelity. So it really makes no sense.
Like this is just a weird one. Having, over the span of 6 days, hearing the RS3 announcement, then hearing this, it's just weird. And there's some decision that was made that doesn't make sense somewhere.
I find it so hard to understand. Like this is a new engine. Well, not a new engine, but this is a new client. It should not be this hard to work with. What went wrong? And the fact that they are very non-transparent about this particular part, I think feeds into the frustration of the community. So it is a little bit unfortunate that it wasn't even part of the summit. It is tucked away in a section in the news post where they make the disappointing announcement that they're going to work on HD before working on a plugin API. And look, fine, I will take HD, right? Like I do use the mobile clients for farm runs and great, it's all going to look prettier, but it's not meaningfully going to change my experience with the game.
It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Because if we look at the plugin hub, most of the plugins are open source. They're written in Java. So you could make an argument that they're not immediately translatable to what they were wanting to go with for their language of choice, for their API. That could be one thing. But at the same time, every hook that is exposed to a RuneLite plugin dev is publicly documented. And if those are publicly documented, and you have it in, a client team, what was the decision that led to not doing this?
Yeah, look, here's the reason why RuneScape might get a plugin API
but see, here's the thing: the people on RS3 have no idea what they're going to do with their plugins, and there is a portion of the population who is vocally opposed to having plugins.
Yeah. No, but exactly, like, you don't have a baseline on RuneScape, which means it is very, like, they can release an API that the only thing it can do is highlight things on the screens and highlight things on the floor, and that's it, and it will already be huge, right? It will be groundbreaking.
Like if they can do a quest helper, a clue helper, and tile packs.
I mean, even that is already, like, more than you need, probably.
Yeah.
Like, imagine just tile packs. Just tile packs.
And what that means is that you can effectively, import somebody's tile pack for a certain boss that tells you where certain things are going to land. Or you can create your own markers, and those will be stored in your client that'll persist across sessions.
Yes. But what we have at RuneLite, some of the RuneLite things are really advanced. They do really complex things. I mean...
Which one are you thinking of?
I mean, when you sail back with your boat and there's a beep. No, I kid.
I like that one.
I know you like that one. I mean, I'm trying to think of the more advanced ones. I mean, each of the raids has a very advanced plugin that shows, like, solutions to puzzles that sort of read the state of the world and show you what to do. Things like that.
I'd like to think about this more because it still doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
This decision. I mean,
I think what we're getting to is that what the realization on the Jagex site might have been that a plugin API is one thing. A plugin API that can do all of the things that RuneLite can do, it's going to take them years.
And at that point, do you just accept any kind of potential anti-cheat things you can't do and just keep RuneLite going for the people who want those plugins?
Maybe that is what it comes down to.
And I think that is also a little bit indicative of the way this roadmap went, because, there is a very real question to ask, did the roadmap fall down in terms of content that people wanted? But if you itemize it out, as we did, there's content here. There's content for each month. Granted, yeah, we do have a few more temporary, events and whatnot. But like you said, and you were getting to earlier, it falls down to the leaning on esports, and maybe it's just presentation.
Yeah, I think the disappointment with this roadmap stems from two things, and I think the first one is presentation. The sailing roadmap by itself is already very meaty, right? There is multiple quests in there. There's multiple expansions in there. There is a bunch of content. There's quests. Like, it has by itself already quite a lot. If you look at this list, half the items come from the sailing roadmap. But the sailing roadmap was presented as a single thing, given the exact same screen time as
QOL and
Deadman.
seasonal events and Deadman All-Stars. Oh, and
Yeah.
RuneFest.
Yeah, exactly.
At the
And all of a sudden,
bottom third of the image.
Yeah, well, and then if you look at the time, right? During like it was like a 5 minute segment. And then we moved on to the next thing. And it makes no sense because like it's huge. Right? It's half the content of the year. And the problem, I think, is that we're still thinking about sailing. I think we should stop thinking like sailing is in the game now.
Yeah.
Yes, we're still getting follow-ups, and I think the boat combat rework and all of that, we can see that as part of sailing, but we're not building a sailing badge too.
So what you're saying is it shouldn't have been chunked as that, and instead they should have threw those individual items into the various months and seasons.
A sea expansion is the same as a new continent. A new quest is a new quest. It doesn't matter that it is unlocked or enabled by sailing. We should start absorbing sailing into what is the game right now.
The player-designed island is effectively a new chunk of skilling and combat and agility or crafting.
And I understand wanting to sell this player-designed island as part of sailing because, you know, it's part of that original. Yes, I get that. I'm not saying to take all of this out, but we can't talk about sailing anymore, in a sense. Like, we need to stop talking about sailing and we need to start talking about content.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's probably still the same team that does all of this content, I don't care.
It's got to be broken up at some point, right?
Yeah, and like a team is going to make it, sure, but that should not be important to how you present this information.
Bingo.
So that's one, and I think that's the presentation side of things. I think the second part of why this roadmap is disappointing is there's no surprises here. Yeah,
we knew everything going back almost a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the Cowboys. Okay, actually, if you had paid attention to the game jam stuff, you could have known that one as well. Fine, we didn't know that we weren't going to start in Misthalin. We didn't learn that the new raid was going to be Fractured Archive. We learned a lot of details about what's going to be on Vampyrium, but none of the actual updates themselves are new, right? If you go from the top, they announced at last Winfest that they were working on the next leagues. Of course, sailing was part of last Winfest. Summer sweep up, sure, that's new. I don't think that's exciting.
But the thing is, we expect there to be a summer sweep up or a project rebalance kind of thing on its own.
Yes. Blood Moon Rises was announced at last Winfest. Community Bingo, again, we already knew that. They announced this as part of Gridmaster. Raids 4, we knew that. Nothing here is new. If you have been following along, if your eyes are open.
And for people who have been around the block, for people who, are at that mid-game going into endgame point, that's maybe a bit disappointing then, right?
Yeah, and I think this comes down to, like, there were some people talking about this and said, isn't that a good thing? Because it means that they're transparent. And yeah, I guess there's something to be said for that. But then, who is this summit for? And I come out of this summit.
And is that how you get to the esports side?
Maybe. But I come out of this summit at the same feeling as RuneFest. I'm like, okay, I didn't really learn anything new. That was interesting and fun, but give me a surprise. Right? Surprise me. Tell me something exciting and new. And that element was completely missing. And then combine that with the fact that previous promises, the Blood Moon Rises and the sailing stuff being delayed, that really, really, really sucks.
And then that's how you get to this feeling that, it's just a roadmap. There's nothing for me to jump up and down about. But there is content. And I think that part was sorely missed by, a portion of the people out there.
It's an amazing year. A new Grandmaster quest with a new area that may or may not be as exciting as
Let's
Pristinus.
let's
We get
also
rates. We get rates 4,
yeah.
which is probably going to be at least 5 high quality bosses. We're gonna get a bunch of quests. We're gonna get probably not a C yet, but we are going to get a bunch of new areas with interesting content. We're gonna get a leagues. It's really not so bad.
No,
like
it's
if
not.
you look at it,
And it's also
really
a
not so bad.
substantial pivot from what the past few years have been. Because if you look at all the content out there, Deadman is PvP, which is combat. Leagues is going to be heavily combat related, and you're going to supercharge to the end game. The summer sweep up stuff that they talk about, yeah, those are always welcomed with open arms. Blood Moon Rises again, Grandmaster Quest 110 combat represented, and then the new raid. Every major line item included in the roadmap itself, in terms of the individual tiles that are there, is geared towards that endgame player.
Yeah, we've been having some really good years for early and mid game through Varlamore, mostly. And this is like you said, it breaks the trend. We are all of a sudden talking about a lot of end game content with not so much focus on the mid game, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. I think you need a better representation across the board. And it's not like endgame players have not gotten anything in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Both the Doom and the Yama are decidedly endgame bosses.
Which was both last year.
Exactly.
And when it comes to, early and mid-game stuff, you can make the argument that, there's a portion of that in sailing, and mid-game also deals with, sailing stuff with what we're getting here. So, I mean, it's definitely not as skewed as Varlamore was, and a bunch of the other things that came out over the last, 2.5 years, but it's there.
And I think maybe that is the main thing I'm sort of missing from this list. I would have loved to see like a big pure scaling update, and some of the Vampyrium stuff falls in there, though I have my doubts about Vampyrium, right? Like if you look at the level requirements for many of the training methods, it's like 60, 70 in the skill level. How does this make sense with a quest that requires 110 combat? Who is going to still be in the market for level 60, 70 training methods by the time, like I'm not even 110 combat yet. And all of my skills are like 80, 85. Like, so, like I am missing a skilling update in like this mid-game segment that makes sense right now. Something along the line of Veil Totems or the Colossal Worm or
Gemstone Crab,
Fallenmore Thieving or Bone Offerings or...
Yeah, I get it, and I think that disconnect is what has made this roadmap not land as well as the previous ones did. And there were comments on the R website of people saying, "Oh, maybe RS3 actually got the better roadmap this year" in the old school subreddit. Which I don't necessarily know if that's the case, because so it's two different games striving to do different things.
So here is a thought I had on the bike just earlier on the way home before the show.
He's Dutch. They ride bikes lots of places.
Yes, I had to go 2 towns over, so I took the bike instead of the car. It makes sense, right? I think the RuneScape 3 roadmap is very exciting if you read it as an old school player. I think the old school roadmap is very exciting if you read it as an RS3 player. Because you told me, and you probably talked about this on last week's show, that if you are just a pure RS3 player, you don't see the value in some of the things that the old school of the RuneScape roadmap provides.
Two thoughts. I'm trying to determine what that means about me. But secondly, you're right. In terms of the bulk of the people on the RS3 team, they had that exact same thought that you were mentioning. Whereas for me, I don't know, if that leagues changed that much for me on RS3, but reading that RS3 roadmap, like you said, was exciting in the way that it felt to read an old school roadmap.
Yeah.
Whereas with me looking at this OS roadmap right now, I'm not too terribly excited about it. There's things I like in it a lot, but I'm not jumping up and down about it.
It's a bunch of endgame content.
Yeah.
I know a game that mostly does endgame content.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the thought I had. Like, it's almost as if some kinds of streams have crossed there, and I don't understand why or how.
Yeah. And especially when you look at the plugins, right?
I mean, that's just the cherry on top.
And this is why RS3 people should have listened to this show, because this was the RS3 content roadmap that the RS3 players wanted at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess so.
Who weren't enthralled with integrity.
I am past the point where I'm like, oh my God, this roadmap is so bad. I'm not excited about it.
No.
I am past it. I have sort of accepted the fact that this is very meaty. I also started to realize, think about the player-designed islands, right? Each of these islands has like 2 new skilling methods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty huge if you think about it. Like, and maybe that fills the gap.
Like if I
Plus,
let me just paint a picture for you, in that if my main wasn't occupied with 120 thieving and Master Quest Point Cape, which I might be working towards, I would be on OS, splitting time between the Gemstone Crab leveling combat stats up and salvaging on sailing. But the account can't be in 2 places at once.
No.
We've kind of mostly officially paused the group Ironman progress. Like at this point, the goal for the group Ironman progress for me would be Quest Point Cape and best in slot Necro gear, which I can do. It's a slog, but it comes down to what's going to be the most interesting, right?
Yeah.
So the point is that there are things here that are interesting to an endgame player who wants to go.
Yeah, and I do think, don't underestimate the pulls. Don't underestimate the small quests that will probably come out that weren't even on the roadmap to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, the old school team has a habit of releasing a bunch of things that they don't
make a fuss about in the roadmap.
Exactly. So, I don't think this will be a bad year. And I think largely it will be a bad 3 months wait until Leagues. I think once Leagues kicks off, a lot of the people will forget about their content drop. They will go full on in Leagues. And by the time Leagues is over, it's basically summer. And that is when the bangers start hitting.
Sailing, Blood Moon Rises. Then we head into fall with RuneFest, and then the raid after that. So,
and all of the sailing stuff, and then raids 4 at the end of the year, massive.
I think we have successfully reframed this roadmap for people who were concerned about it. Hopefully it reaches the people it needs to. Which I don't know who this episode's going to reach, because it's this weird hybrid space of coming off of, RS3 stuff, but at the same time, there is a discussion to be had about this and how it all lands. So we'll see. But you people who listen to this show are great. All right. We do have some achievements. Starting off, we have Skips with 200 mil thieving on January 28th. Then we have Mama Mystic with 99 necromancy on the 27th. Tim 2 got 200 mil crafting on the 26th. Adani got 200 mil thieving on the 25th. And Zerdones got 200 mil necromancy on the 25th as well.
Coming from old school, hearing these numbers is mad. But I will call them out regardless. Godin got 200 mil crafting XP on January 24th. Iron VSS got 99 magic on January 24th. And Stinky Pete 22 got 200 mil thieving XP on January 24th. And then finally, on the January 22nd, we have Jade Gizmo getting 200 mil mining XP. God, mining is so slow on old school. I'm in the slog right now to get 85. We have some other achievements as well that people can post in the Discord under the achievements tab. Do so, because we do call them out on the show. Some of the examples that were posted in the last week were Snail Mage finishing the entire Vault of Hereditas log on January 29th. Xedone's getting Bernie, objectively the best pet, on January 28th.
And one of the hardest.
And finally, I would say Mighty Myth, but without any vowels. So please put vowels in your name next time so I can read it. Got a Master Quest cape on January 26th.
Nicely done, everybody. Nicely done. Good to have some achievements on board this week. Zerdones, my condolences, and also good job to Snail Mage for completing that heist. I would not want to set the goal of logging a heist presently, given how long some of those can take. But if you want to be on the show this year, if you think you have something to offer to this podcast, we have a help wanted form that you can find over at update.show/help. There's a series of questions that will gauge where we'll reach out to you, when we'll reach out to you, and what your role might be on some of these shows. So if you're interested in appearing on this podcast, or you think you might just have an interesting perspective to offer, visit update.show/help and fill out the help wanted form. There's two very interesting questions on there that I'm eager to see people's answers to. But with that, I'll turn this over to you, Sirion, for pick of the week, a rather unconventional pick of the week from what we normally do in these parts.
Yes, so if you're still here with us after, I think, over 2 hours at this point, oh boy, then you must care at least a little bit.
You're going to have some explaining to do as to how the OS roadmap ended up being longer than the RS3 one.
Because I have a lot of words to say, that's why. So it felt appropriate that for those people who are still sticking around and caring about old school, I would give them a little bit more old school content. And I am going to point out one of the biggest and most famous old school content creators that goes by the name of Settled. You've heard of Swampletics, probably. This is him. And I was, for the longest time, in the camp of I don't want watch RuneScape content creators. I don't care about all of that. But I don't even quite remember what kicked it off, but I did start watching, I think Nightmare Mode was the first series I watched. So Nightmare Mode is a hardcore Iron Man where you have 1 hit point. If you take any damage, that's it for the account. I don't want to spoil too much, but one of the first goals that Settled went for was getting a fire cape on this account, without taking a single point of damage ever. Does he succeed? Does he not? It is up to you to watch that. The thing that he does incredibly well is he turns these things into a story. I did end up binging Swampletics a few months ago.
Oh, I think I just spoiled the answer to that one. Oops, never mind. for people watching video.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. But like I watched all of Swampletics as well. I sort of binged it, which is the entire series is available now. You can, and it really shows the growth of him as a content creator and as sort of a person as well. But the way he ended up turning it into a story and a narrative, like it's almost cinema at this point. That to me is an impressive skill and is sort of to me worthy of a subscription. So I think Swampletics, if you want to watch any of his series, is still the best one to start with. It is probably one of his best. Nightmare Mode, I think, is not a really good one. Of course, if you want to watch the current series that he is doing a sailing locked Iron Man, which is very interesting. Shane, you care about farming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you only have access to sailing docks and sailing islands, how would you get yourself some flax?
I don't know the old school ecosystem well enough for that. Does it have anything to do with the new area that was added with Varlamore Batch 2?
You spend about 100 hours raking weeds. That's how you get 27 farming, and then you can plant the flax seeds on Alduin. So if you are like, farming is too easy and I want to stretch out the time I spend farming, make a sailing locked Iron Man account to get 99 farming. But no, it's really interesting. He has very interesting restrictions, and it is interesting to see how he uses the game knowledge, but how he crafts the story around that as well. And to me, that makes him a very unique content creator that I can recommend.
Yeah, the different thing about this space is that I think you have a lot more of these sorts of content creators on OS than you do ours.
Exactly. This is another reason I wanted to raise awareness of this. And I think the moment that RuneScape goes down the line a little bit more with integrity and has a more solid foundation, you can start building these snowflake accounts around them much more.
Yeah, and I mean it's a different thing, but just cherry picking, some Leagues experiences as an example. The Leagues experiences that were presented in RS3 for the first one were all inherently one-dimensional in terms of the ways to do things. Most of the stuff, had one good way of doing it.
You would do the same thing as you were doing the main game, just 12 times as fast.
Exactly. Which was fine for the first League.
Yeah.
But
and this is why area locking, I think, is interesting and a necessity for future leagues, because it forces you to think within a certain set of constraints and do things that otherwise.
Oh, I got Pern and Tannis last week to admit that they'll actually try the next league if it has area locking.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end here. Perhaps a little bit different show than people were expecting this week, but I still think it's an important thing to dive into nonetheless, primarily because of what we got to in the end about how it is that Endgame experience that people have come to expect on RS3, and it's like, where did that go this year? Oh, it's in the old school roadmap, primarily.
But it is also, I think, still an example of what a roadmap might look like if the game has a solid integrity and does not have to spend all of this time on fixing things.
And then the question is, well, do people like that?
The grass is always greener.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. I don't know that there's anything else left to say. You have anything you want to say before we go?
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for everybody listening, for dealing with my voice for over 2 hours.
Yeah,
and I said, I have words.
And if we have any old school haters, I'll send them your way.
You can send them my way, and I will slap them with my. I can't I will hit them with my shadow. There you go, with my Timican shadow.
When you eventually get it. When you
eventually get it.
But of course, in the meantime, if you want to get the show as it arrives each and every week, I don't know how we're doing next week yet, because next week we have the Dog Quest and a combat beta. Because the combat beta just arrived today, but we do have a Dog Quest, which people are excited for.
The goodest boy.
So if you want,
it's Princess.
Yeah.
All dogs are good boys. We know this. This is fact.
So if you want to hear that when it arrives, update.show/subscribe. We're on all the major podcast listening services out there. Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and more. Just visit update.show/subscribe. Pick your favorite one. If you are inclined as to listen on YouTube, that's at youtube.com/RSBANDB. Like, subscribe, even comment. The commenting engagement helps out a lot because, it gives signals to the YouTube algorithm that people like what was being said. And there was actually some good discussion.
See, you should not send the old school haters to me. You should send them to the YouTube comments.
There was a good discussion last week, folks. I'll say on the roadmap episode. So thank you for that. I appreciated hearing from all of you and everybody who's actually come back since they heard about that. There were multiple people this week that either DM'd me or just in the friends chat or something like that. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. But of course, thank you, Sirion, for being here. Always good.
Glad to be here.
And with that, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of RSBANDB Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.